The recipe for this blue-winged olive nymph is in The Art of Fly Tying by John Van Vliet. I think it's a pretty classic nymph pattern. I'm tying it on a number 14. Probably could tie it on a longer 14 hook than this. I'm using olive thread. The tail is lemon wood duck, so I'll just grab a few of the fibers. Obviously this is a feather I've used before, but I will grab just a small bunch of those fibers here, pull them so that they're even tipped, and clip those off. Then I'm going to tie them so that they curl up, and I want the tail about the length of the hook shank. So wrap that in. I'm back here at the beginning of the bend of the hook, and I'm going to wrap forward. It's a stiff enough group of fibers that they lay on top of the hook shank nicely. Clip out the butt ends. The recipe calls for brown silk for the rib. I'm using some brown ultra thread in 140 denier. And tie that in, and one of the ways to make sure that I keep that thread on the top of the shank is to pull forward on it a little bit as I wrap back on it, and that'll keep it centered on the top. The body on this olive nymph is olive dubbing. The recipe does call for rabbit. I'm using possum because, again, that's what I have. So I'm going to try to taper the abdomen. I'm going to come up maybe a little bit more than that. I want to make sure that I'm leaving plenty of room. This is a short hook, or a standard length hook, but probably a little bit shorter than normally for a nymph. But I need to make sure that I have plenty of room in the front for the thorax and the legs. So I'll go ahead and wrap that brown thread around the body for the rib. Catch that thread in, and then I'll just wrap under it too, and then I can cut it off. Then for the wing casing, I have some goose feather, and I think the rule of thumb generally is that your casing is the width of your gape. So I've cut that off of this is a wing, what we call a wing quill feather. So I'm just going to lay that flat on top of the shank, squeeze it, and then wrap up over that a few times just to catch it in. And then that'll fold forward when I do the wing casing. And then I'm going to clip out all the butt ends here. The thorax is also olive dubbing. Thorax is quite a bit bigger than, fatter, I'm going to say, than the body is, so plan your dubbing accordingly. And I'll just wrap that dubbing up, make a little ball for the thorax. Now before I bring the wing casing up, I am going to put the legs on, and for that I do have a partridge feather. They're probably a little bit long for the legs. I do have it grabbed with the hackle plier and the tip, then I pull back on all the fibers that will become the legs. I'm putting this on like a wet fly hackle. pull back on the fibers that are going to wrap around the shank, and then I'm going to clip that tip so I just have a little triangle up in front, and then lay that against the shank of the hook and wrap over it. That catches it in. I'll grab the stem or the butt end with my hackle pliers, and then I'm going to pull back. I didn't catch it in well enough, so we do it again. And lay that little triangle against the shank of the hook and wrap up around it. Wrap over it to catch that hackle in. Grab the stem with my hackle pliers, pulled back on the fibers as I wrap, and I'll just wrap down. And I did tie it with the shiny side of that hackle feather out so that the fibers will bend backwards. Of course, it is a patridge hackle, so it's soft hackle for the legs. So wrap enough to get rid of the fibers on the stem, and then I'll wrap up over that stem. I just kind of standardize for 3 wraps. Pull back on that and wrap up over that end. And I'm going to clip that out, use my cuticle cutter. Then I'll just pull down on all the hackle that's on the top of the fly, and then bring that goose fibers up over the top of them, and that'll make them lay down and splay out to the sides. Pull that tight across the thorax, squeeze it with my other fingers, and then wrap up over that. And I'm going to wrap back towards the bend of the hook as I wrap the head, so that I don't crowd the eye any more than I need to. That's something to pay attention to really on all our flies, but this one wants to crowd that eye. And I'll whip finish, and the whip finish, I'm going to do a 5 wrap finish. That'll help build the head a little bit more, and try to keep those wraps back away from the eye. For the head cement, I do have some diluted goop, and I just stick a needle in my jar and grab some drops of that. I'll put that on the head, but then I'm also going to make sure that that wing case gets a good drop of head cement as well. This then is a blue wing olive nymph.